Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a special discussion on Facebook Live and YouTube. We can do this Indian country. We're going to have an interactive discussion about the state of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indian country and a conversation among tribal leaders, the chief acting medical officer of the Indian Health Service, and a Native American parent about how the vaccine uptake is going in our communities, particularly those Native communities in the Southwest. And that doesn't limit you, though. If you'd like to participate with a question in chat from wherever you are, please do, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. This is all part of the We Can Do This Indian Country campaign, sponsored by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, as well as partners, the Indian Health Service, and a number of other entities. This is a follow-up to a series of such discussions, and we started in the Montana area where we partnered with the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council. And so we're looking for any partners that would like to join us, but we're so pleased to have the guests that we do tonight. I'm David Kenoyer. I'm an enrolled member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe of South Dakota, and my Kenoyer family is also from the Yankton tribe, and a bunch of brothers. My grandfather had more than half a dozen brothers, so there's lots of us all over the country. And it's been great to work on this campaign for G&G Advertising, which is a Native American firm subcontracting on the campaign. And we're going to see some of the We Can Do This Indian country spots that G&G has produced. But this is about an interactive discussion. We've heard lots of fairly positive news, right, since the pandemic broke, when several of the Native nations in the Southwest were literally some of the most challenged hotspots in the whole country, including the Navajo Nation and some other tribes. And what a turnaround it's been, where there's actually a number of high vaccination rates on the nation and other places. But I'd like to turn immediately now to Governor Brian Vayo of Acoma Pueblo in the state of New Mexico, in which the Pueblo is located. But the Pueblo was there long before the state was. Many of us have heard of Sky City. Governor Vayo, one of the longest continually occupied pieces of land in the whole country there on Acoma Pueblo. Thank you for joining us. You've been a longtime tribal leader there, and we were teasing you before we started that you served as lieutenant governor some decades ago, which is hard to believe given your youthful good looks. But thank you for joining us tonight. Why don't you introduce yourself and then let us know what's the state of the COVID-19 pandemic there on the Pueblo and your surrounding communities?
Sure. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Vayo, and I'm the governor at the Pueblo of Acoma in New Mexico. Thank you for that nice introduction. Just like anywhere else in the world, it's been a challenge. The Pueblo of Acoma certainly has had some challenges during this time. Who would have known, right? And just an unprecedented experience for us. And I feel terribly that our children and our elders have had to experience this time. But you know what? We're strong people, and we make sense of these things when we reflect and through our own belief system, but reflect on our heritage, our culture, our traditions, our indigenous way of knowing. Traditional knowledge has come in to play in a very profound way during this time, and I'm just so grateful that my Acoma people have come together to always uplift ourselves even during these dark times, and to help each other understand the times that we are experiencing. We have had since the onset of the first case in New Mexico, which was in March of 2020. That same day, my office issued a declaration of a state of emergency, and 4 days later issued an executive order that was in alignment with what was coming down to us from the national level and also the state level. And I'm really grateful that our tribe established, along with other tribes in New Mexico, established a close relationship with the state of New Mexico to help us understand and navigate those very early days of this pandemic. So, we've done the best that we could do as a tribe with our resources and bringing the community together to get us through this time. We have a tribal membership of about 5,100 tribal members. About 3,700 of those tribal members live on the reservation. Since March 11th, our tribal boundaries have been closed with only one access point. Even today, we maintain that access point. And that was one measure that we put into place, but there were many others that were part of this executive order. Just like many tribes throughout the country, we had to do everything to safeguard our people. Today, we are busying ourselves with the administration of vaccines. We are working in partnership with the State of New Mexico Department of Health. Our local Indian Health Service unit, the ACL Hospital, located on our tribal lands, is also actively engaged in this process. And so it's been really wonderful to know that we have these two resources or two sources for accessing the vaccine. And really happy that we are, as a result of this past Friday's vaccination of 12 to 15-year-olds, and 12 years and older, with a focus on those 12 to 15-year-olds. Once these individuals receive their second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, we will have reached herd immunity at the Pueblo of Acoma at 90%. So this presents great opportunity for us then to really begin taking a careful look at our recovery and healing from this pandemic. So we have a lot to look forward to. We have a lot to be grateful for. And, unfortunately, during this time, we lost 23 tribal members to COVID. The peak of COVID was in those early winter months when we had a spike in cases, almost 200 tribal members in quarantine at one time. It was just the most frightening experience for all of us. But we got through that, and we mourned the best way that we could, even while we couldn't all come together to do what we would normally do for our loved ones. Just some of the toughest times, and it's even hard to put into words. And so there's a recovery process that needs to happen as a result of that. There needs to be some healing. And when we heard of the initial ideas around recovery coming down from the New Mexico or the CDC, from the federal government, that's one way to look at recovery. But for Indigenous peoples, recovery and healing is also involves a spiritual process, and this is going to take us some time, but we are eager to begin that process. And one of the things that we are all looking forward to is that opportunity again to be full Acoma people, to re-engage with our culture and traditions, all of which have been basically put on hold during this time of pandemic. And here again, just another terribly difficult thing to accept as we were going through the pandemic was knowing that we could not come together to practice our own Indigenous way of life, a process that has sustained us since time immemorial. And when we couldn't do that, it was just so just unreal. Um, but as I said earlier, we are looking forward to those days of re-engagement with family, community, and culture. So, with reaching herd immunity, we can begin that process.
Wow. Well, thank you for your leadership. I can't imagine, right, what it's been like. You have Interstate 40 coming there from Albuquerque. One of our viewers is listening there, 60 miles to the south, and I've been lucky to have visited your beautiful reservation, your beautiful pueblo, several times, and the church there. They tell the story of your mission church in Sky City, where the beams and the wood from that church were hauled from the mountain to the north of you, and that wasn't an easy process. Probably 30, 40 miles of hauling those things on people's backs, literally, and surviving and thriving there for so many centuries. How do you put this in perspective, given the long history of your people there? Have you had elders try to compare it to other things, or yourself, particularly since it's been so difficult and people have become so kind of tired of everything, right? How do we keep keeping on?
Well, thank you for that question. It's an important question for all of us as we reflect on these times. And as I mentioned earlier, we have really depended on our traditional knowledge. There are words in our language that describe pandemic, that identify disease or diseases. And there are stories of times in our history when our ancestors experienced times like this, and times where many of our tribal members of all ages lost their lives. And so when we, hear these terms that you don't normally hear, these terms of Ayush and Hiyats, and it's scary to hear the word, because the implications of those beings, or that idea of an illness that consumes and can consume people, and the thought that those beings could terminate us is just so very frightening. But the traditional knowledge and the stories of our history and the times of our ancestors living not only in our present day community of Acoma, place that you visited, but of those times when our ancestors were on their migration from the place of emergence, and the stories of those times in those places, including Mesa Verde and what's known now today as the Mesa Verde in the Four Corners region, Chaco Canyon in north central New Mexico. These are our ancestral homelands, and there are many stories of similar occurrences involving these beings, or I'll just refer to them as beings, but the disease and the sickness that themselves, and the ways that our ancestors handled those times, and made sense of those things, and respected. It sounds odd to say that they had a great respect, and that we have a great respect for the illness or the virus. But we have to acknowledge that it's a living being. We have to acknowledge that this time came for a certain purpose and reason. And while we might not ever know why, what we do understand and take very seriously is the fact that we have to then rely on our way of life and our culture and traditions to to get us through times like this. So there's all of that playing out right in the minds of the Acoma people during this time. And then, there's the Western approach to controlling and protecting our human resources, but also our lands and our natural environment during this time. And then there's the medical piece that makes sense or doesn't make sense, but we're going along with it, because we're not necessarily the experts in Western medicine, but we have our own traditional processes and own way of curing and healing that were also very integral during this time. So when you have all of those things together, bringing them together for the purpose of protecting the people, it means taking some very grave measures in some cases to ensure that the safety and protection of the people is the priority, and that we do the best job at achieving that. And so, yes, we're all strained. We've all made great sacrifices during this time. The stay-at-home orders, the curfews, the restricted access on and off. It's taken its toll. And we, as part of this healing process, are going to have to really take a careful look at how we address the mental health issues, the depression, all of these things that are just so they're just huge issues that we will have to address as time goes on. And yes, we have had tribal members who are restless, who are eager to have more freedom. We have those who have broken the rules, but that's all to be expected during a time like this. What I am grateful for, though, is that the people have come together. Families have come together. Even while they can't physically be close together, they have found ways to reassure one another, to express their love and care for one another, to remind each other of the importance of reflecting on our culture and our history and our traditions to get us through these tough times.
We may never go, quote, back to normal, right? It may never be quite what it was for the United States or the world, but how close are you to having more typically normal in-person events, cultural gatherings, funerals? Are you getting there?
We're not there yet. Our goal was to work very hard towards achieving herd immunity so that we can begin taking a close look and actions so that we might work towards reestablishing a level of normalcy, whatever that's going to be. I'm very optimistic that this year, maybe perhaps as early as this summer, we will begin to see some change, some good change. We will begin to see families re-engaging with one another. We will see our tribal members who live off the reservation, who have not had access back home, finally have the opportunity to come home, to step foot onto their own lands, to enter their family homes and to be with family again. That's coming very soon. As far as social gatherings and cultural observances, those don't necessarily lie in my authority or the authority of the tribal council. We will provide guidance, of course, but our cultural leaders will come together to help us make those decisions. And again, very optimistic that by the fall we should have the opportunity again to re-engage with culture, because this is what we all desire at this time. and are anxiously awaiting that opportunity. So, the recovery and healing here at Acoma will begin soon. And I'm so grateful for the collective prayers and strength and endurance of our community to get us to this point that we can say in a few more weeks we will have achieved herd immunity.
As you said, after the children, the young adolescents, 12, your target is 12, 13, 14, and 15. After you get them immunized, you'll feel more confident that you can have a discussion about that herd immunity and then seeing what happens right after that. Because around the country, you're right, you're being quite cautious, but we're seeing, even though a lot of places have taken their mask mandates down unless you're vaccinated, you go to restaurants, you go out, sporting events, right, are starting to fill the seats. Not all of them, but they're starting to. But still, we're seeing those stories of the high infection rates among unvaccinated people, right? And while the death and infection rates overall are going down, when you just look at the unvaccinated, they're as high as they were, in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that data is so important in this process. And I must commend our Health Command team and our partners, the State of New Mexico Department of Health, the CDC, the Indian Health Service, and others who have provided us with guidance and the technical expertise that we needed also to make determinations throughout this time. And we continue to rely on them. One of the things that we have been advocating for through the CDC, the state of New Mexico, and even the federal government when President Biden called for schools to reopen was that, in all of this messaging to the world, oftentimes Native America is never mentioned, and or the sovereignty of our tribes is never acknowledged. And one of the things that we've been asking for and advocating for, and we're finally seeing, is that agencies like the CDC, like the Health and Human Services Department and the state of New Mexico are now acknowledging that while they are reopening and while they are loosening up their orders, that tribal nations are sovereign nations, and they will determine at the time that is best for them when reopening will occur and what that process might look like. So, that's really important because there's so much at stake, right? I mean, my tribe lost 23 tribal members. That losing the first tribal member to COVID was tragic. And so there's so much at stake for us. And we have to continue to do what we can to ensure that we are protecting our people so that our culture can and our beautiful culture and our beautiful people continue for centuries to come.
Well, thank you, Governor. I know there have been sentiments expressed among our viewers of good wishes to you. If you can hang with us, stick with us. Your message of unity, your message of let's stay the path, stay the course, your collective decision making, right? You mentioned your cultural leaders and not just you, right? Not just a president and a vice president and a cabinet, but a very long tested way of making decisions there for the group and the collective. A lot to learn from Acoma Pueblo, and I think it captures the spirit of the "We Can Do This Indian Country" messaging that has popped up on my Facebook feed in terms of the circle and keeping the circle strong. And I'd like to just to play on your wonderfully, almost elegant way of talking about how you've fought these beings there in Acoma, and play one of the radio spots from the "We Can Do This Indian Country" messages that talks about keeping this circle strong. Let's listen.
For us, the circle is everything. Our ancestors survived by sticking together. Today, life is a bit easier, but our challenges are not. COVID-19, a disease that has hit our communities hard. Now, more than ever, we need to stick together and keep the circle strong. We need everyone, young and old, women, men, rural and urban. The circle calls on us to care for and encourage others. You not only have the voice to share your knowledge that vaccines are safe and effective, but the ability to help your family and your community members. It might be as simple as helping them to make the appointment or giving them a ride. It's our time to complete the circle.
We can do this. Go to vaccines.gov to find vaccines near you. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
Well, this is a special conversation focused on the tribal Southwest. And thank you to Governor Brian Vayo for beginning our discussion. And at this point, if you stay with us, Governor, if you can, I'm going to bring in Dr. Loretta Christensen, who is the Acting Chief Medical Officer for the Indian Health Service, an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation, and also the Chief Medical Officer for the Navajo area of the Indian Health Service. And we were so impressed in our pre-game warm-up, Dr. Christensen, your long resume and amazing credentials, undergrad, Harvard, medical doctor, MBA, and a master's of jurisprudence, and a lot of time in the Northeast. So you've moved home and you're in Albuquerque now, and we're just so grateful to have you. What's the status, Doctor, of COVID-19 in the Indian Health Service and the Navajo area where you spend most of your focus?
Well, good evening. I'm very happy to be here with you today. We are doing well in Navajo Nation. We've had a very rough ride, if you will. We were hit very hard by a big wave of COVID in the spring of 2020, and then struck again in the fall by an even more intense wave of COVID-19. So we are a very resilient and strong people. We worked very hard together to get through it, and we are actually doing extremely well now. We have an excellent vaccine program. My congratulations and my pride in our Navajo people for stepping up, for waiting in line, for being there to get their vaccines. And of course, my gratitude to our fantastic vaccination teams across Navajo who have worked tirelessly through this whole entire effort. So we're very proud of the work we've done. And I think that some of the things brought up by Governor Vahe is very, very important, is that everybody works together. It never happens by itself. And working together with Navajo Nation, we have been a unified command through the entire COVID pandemic. And this led us to planning for our vaccinations very, very early. It allowed us to create the distribution methods that we use to get the vaccines to every corner of Navajo Nation. And we're very grateful for that opportunity to work with our tribal, urban, and our Navajo Nation together to fight COVID. So I think we're in good shape right now. We are also working towards our herd immunity for the population that lives and resides on Navajo Nation every day. As we say, there's a lot of different denominators. Our user population is about 240,000 across 27,000 square miles. But our population in our community of Navajo Nation is about 175,000. And right now we have vaccinated fully over 110,000. And we have given over 234,000 vaccinations in Navajo Nation and our surrounding communities. So So we feel very good about that. We still have more to do, and we encourage everyone to strongly consider getting vaccinated to protect themselves, their family, and their community so that they can return to the life that we know and that we had before COVID. Celebrate together our ceremonies, all of our gatherings. We look forward to getting back to that balance and harmony.
You know, I mentioned this the last time that we had a discussion a few weeks ago, and you know, I'm in my 50s, and you know, I have my vaccination card that my urban Indian clinic here in the Twin Cities of Minnesota gave me, and it's been such a positive story generally, right, of vaccination uptake in Native communities. Not entirely perfect, but it's so nice to see some positive news, and it's not something we're used to, right? We're used to being last. We're used to things not working. We're used to long wait times, you know, for our turn, and it's remarkable. And I'm just curious. I mean, you've been at this a long time and know how complex public health can be. And you talked about the unified command. Was it that significant just to be together, and as sort of the governor talked about too, just to maybe see a clear enemy here? Or what did it take?
Well, President Nez often calls COVID-19 the monster, and I completely agree with him. When we were preparing way back at the beginning of COVID in March of 2020, we knew we were vulnerable. We had so many social determinants of health that we work with every day and that we try to help our people through every single day. And then let's lay over COVID, and we have this terrible disease that's spreading quickly across the United States. So we were bracing for that. And the best way to be ready for that was to have a unified front, public messaging that's been unified all along. We give the same Facebook Lives with President. We send out the same messages. So everything is very, very clear to our people so that they can understand everything that we're facing. And we have been very transparent. And I feel that built confidence and trust. When they started really getting into the development of the vaccines, we started sharing that with our people very, very early. And we had, you know, subject matter experts, we had doctors on, we had healers and leaders from the tribe. And of course, President's been present through the entire event, supporting us every single day with everything that we do. And this gave strength. This gave real strength to the community. Because you realize that, as the governor said, one death is devastating. We had over 1,000 losses in our Navajo tribe, and we certainly grieve and miss those people every single day. But we knew that we had to come back. We knew we had to heal, and we had to move forward. We had very early public health interventions as well: lockdowns, shelter in place, mask, distancing, hand hygiene. We repeatedly taught this everywhere we went. And it helped. It definitely helped. We had what I consider one of the best contact tracing teams in the whole country, culturally appropriate. They were our people doing this job. Our partners, Cope and John Hopkins, helped us get everybody ready to go, and we mitigate immediately. We are on these cases immediately. And we did some studies that showed that we saved tens of thousands of cases of COVID by intervening so aggressively and so quickly. And that was tribal, urban, Navajo Nation, IHS, all working together as one team, helping wherever help was needed. And that is absolutely the reason that we made it through those two waves. And then bring the vaccinations in again. We worked together, we distributed to everyone, we shared vaccine, we picked it up and took it to other places. We helped people with their events. It didn't matter if it was a federal site or a tribal site. If they needed more people to work, we got them more people to help with the vaccinations. And all of this synergy that occurred between all of us made us extremely successful. And now we are defeating COVID. We are getting that community immunity. We are protecting our people, our future, our history. And so I can't tell you what an experience it's been. So proud of everyone.
Well, thank you. Hold on. You're there in Albuquerque, and you work with the Navajo area for the Indian Health Service, but you're also acting medical officer for the entire IHS. So I want to play a couple comments from Arizona and Arizona tribal leaders and bring these thoughts into the conversation. The work in Acoma, the work in Navajo has been nothing short of miraculous, and yet it's not. Some other communities are still struggling, right, to bring that unity and bring that awareness. So let's hear from some Arizona tribal leaders for a couple minutes, and stay with me, Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
The loss of our leaders, loss of our mentors, loss of our loved ones has been devastating. It's been traumatizing for so many of our communities. And now we just had our first in-person tribal leaders meeting in more than a year. And we had so many tribal leaders that came and showed up, and they said, I just wanted to see you. I just wanted to see each other. I started weekly emergency response calls for our tribal leaders. Some of the help that was provided from one tribe to another was done very, very discreetly. You would hear one tribe say, oh, we're missing this, or we need that, or we don't have feed for our animals. And then once the call ended, I would get a text message from one or two or three tribal leaders very quietly saying, put me in touch, I want to help, we can help them.
When the vaccine was available, even though in limited doses, but when it became available, that first 25% of our tribal membership, they jumped on it. But then since then, it's been very slow. We've had the walk-in clinics, we've had the drive-up vaccination events, those large-scale vaccination events, and those were successful. But then we see the demand more focused, where we have to individualize that uptake of the vaccine. We just unveiled our first mobile vaccination unit last week. It's hashtag what I came up with, community immunity. We're actually going to be driving these vehicles into our villages. We can go right to households, right to housing developments, and just go door to door and vaccine, and educate them about it, and then just give them safely the vaccine there.
So, Dr. Christensen, that's some commentary from the greater Phoenix area. And again, amazing what the Navajo Nation has been able to do, the Pueblo of Acoma. How do we help some of these communities that are having a harder time with that herd immunity, or even just ticking up the vaccination rates above 50%, 60%?
Well, this is extremely important, and I'm so happy that you asked. We are working very much at the headquarters level to look around all of our areas and see who might be having challenges. And we're trying to encourage them to work with other tribes. For example, Dr. Jim from Navajo Nation had a meeting with the Great Plains Vice President to share public messaging and some other, and we're happy to do it. And we try to get that out and about, that people should share whatever they have so people don't have to constantly reinvent something. If we have 50 templates that tell you all about COVID and all the different things that are going on, let's share them, let's help. So we have been working very hard to get lists of best practices together so that we can share them across all of these organizations and perhaps give them ideas on ways to strengthen their vaccine efforts. For example, showing up at sporting events, going to community centers. We did a lot of strike teams in Navajo where we went out to over 5,000 homes and vaccinated the disabled, the homebound, and their caregivers and their families if they were there. So we want to capture all these families together. We highly encourage families showing up for vaccination events so that we can catch up on the childhood vaccines, and we can also get the adults, make sure that they're vaccinated as well. Of course, as was mentioned on one of those videos, we do drive-ups, we do communities, we go to supermarkets, we go to schools, not because they're in session, but because they're a focal point of the community. And that's where people can gather. We've even gone to casinos and set up in the casino parking lots. So we are going to take these best practices and we're pushing them out to all of these areas, to all of the tribes, federal, tribal, urban, saying, here's some ideas. This is what worked for us. You need support. Let us know. We'll get you more information. We'll get you hooked up with one of the tribes that have done some very unique and successful events. And we're here to support. We want everyone to be successful. And we all understand living in rural and extreme rural areas, it's very challenging. It is very, very challenging. We know that even having gas money and having a car to get to a vaccination could be the limiting factor. So we want to try to erase all of those barriers and help to get everyone vaccinated. The mobile units, the assistance that we got from FEMA in some of our areas to help with the vaccination events, all very key issues in trying to get this all across Indian country. So I think that we can all help each other. We should all help each other. And I, to my knowledge, every tribe has been more than willing to share their information and help the rest of the people in Indian country so that we can all be safe, so we can all move forward.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think so much of it, right? It's not just, there's no such thing as a silver bullet, so to speak, right? It takes a number of multi-pronged, as you say, and just the picture of these strike teams. I mean, the Navajo Nation, right, is you drive and drive and drive and drive. I mean, it's 90 miles between tumbleweeds, it feels like sometimes. And I can just see these strike teams pulling up, to the HUD home with the Hogan in the back. And what is that like? I mean, how did this work, right? I assume more people were expecting sort of help, and there was word that these strike teams were going to be in a chapter for that day. But what was that like?
Well, it's driven by our amazing public health nursing, our community health representatives, which work for the tribe typically, and those teams that go out, generally speaking, outside of COVID to check on people and to make sure they're getting their medications, et cetera. Well, they know everybody. They know every home, every Hogan, every road, how to get there. And they have been exceptional during this effort. We send our public health nursing with them, and we go. And what we found, which is very, to me, very poignant, is a lot of them were just afraid to leave their home to go get a vaccine. They weren't against it at all. They were afraid. They said, I'm going to stay home and stay safe. I've had too many losses. I'm afraid. And that just, wow, that just gets to you, because you're like, okay, then we need to get out there more. And we need to make sure that we go to every house and offer the vaccine to them, to their families, and to their caregivers, because we don't know the reasons. I don't think we've seen a tremendous amount of hesitancy. We've seen more some fear to leave their homes. And we need to just keep reaching out until we answer everyone's question and make sure they understand why it's so important to get the vaccination. So that's the goal constantly, is to go where the people are, meet them where they are, and work with them where they're comfortable or where they can get to. And that's very key to this whole effort that we have across Indian country.
Well, Doctor, let me bring in another tribal leader, and we might have a three-way conversation here if she has thoughts on what she's heard. But Chairwoman Amber Torres of the Walker River Paiute tribe, within the current borders of the state of Nevada, not too far from Reno in the western part of the state. Chairwoman, you've been a long-time leader there over a number of years, and this had to have been a pretty difficult challenge for you, maybe nothing like you've seen before. What are your thoughts on what Dr. Christensen has shared? And I think you have a pretty positive story there. And how do we expand that to other Native communities around you and across the country?
So, Pija Takano, me, Amber Torres, me Nania na Agarikarapuanabi na Agaigwe. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Torres. I'm the chairman for the Walker River Paiute tribe, located here in Shores, Nevada. First off, I do want to thank you for having me this evening, and thank you for the question. I can definitely say this has been the most challenging thing that I've been through thus far. And, we are a small reservation. We are very rural. We are very desolate. We are located on about 325,000 acres, and we have about 1,000 members that live on the reservation. I can say that on 3/16 of 2020, we went into immediate action and declared a state of emergency. And by 3/17/2020, we had resolutions in place, immediately closing our borders, even closing it to tribal members that did not permanently reside on the reservation. I think that was a very hard task that we had to do, but we had to make sure that our people were safe. As was talked about before, we had to put resolutions in place, shutting down public gatherings, doing a stay at home, and even setting a curfew for a very long time. But we had to protect our people, and the thing that we did have to do immediately was we had to leave essential staff in place so that we could still continue to provide those services and make people feel as if we were still here to address the concern and the issues. Because again, when we declared the state of emergency, it was all brand new to everybody. I think that, our emergency management crew was not specifically versed in this, but I think we caught on fairly quick and we went into action right away, because ultimately the health and safety of our community is our ultimate objective. And so, the emergency management crew continued to monitor, control, and even evaluate the sick to make sure that they were nurtured back to health. And right now, we are just now looking at doing slow openings on the reservation, allowing tribal members to come back, opening up businesses again, because we ultimately were making sure that everybody was mandated. They had to wear masks, allowing one person in at a time into our store with barriers up that not everybody could go in and touch everything, because we also had tribal members that work in our facilities, and so again, we had to make tough decisions early on that a lot of people did not agree with, but ultimately, out of 1,000 members that live on our reservation, we've only had 118 positives and one COVID-related death on our reservation, I think due to our quick acting and our actions that we took. So, I'm proud to say that right now, as of 4/23/21, we have not had any positives on our reservation, although we have had the UK variant here, which is a whole nother ball of wax. So, we still continue to have the mask mandate in place, and we have slowly opened up our reservation. Although we've left our Weber Reservoir closed, that is a huge recreational area and a huge economic development or economic driver for the Walker River Reservation. But again, ultimately, regardless of what the state or the feds are doing around us, we are a sovereign nation, and we have to make the best decisions on behalf of our people to make sure that when we get back to what is considered the new normal, that all of our people are here and we are whole. So, I can definitely say that, IHS did an outstanding job with making sure that they were there with the proper PPE, with testing machines, and they've done a great job with rolling out the vaccination for our reservation. Again, being so small and rural, I think that we had an advantage because we were able to get all of our people that wanted it initially vaccinated quickly. So, again, that was a huge advantage to us. I think, the consulting that came out of the pandemic has been phenomenal. And I think that Congress finally funding these programs at an adequate level is very sad that it had to come on the back of a pandemic. But I'm glad to see that funding is funneling down to our respective tribal nations to make sure that we're continuing to prevent and protect our people. I can definitely say that right now, We are trying to push those efforts in the vaccination process, even bringing, because we are a checkerboard reservation, bringing non-Indians in, and then also other tribal nations from our surrounding areas if we can service them faster than their own. So, I can say, when we talk about sharing, I think that's been the biggest thing, is that as Indian people, we do share. We shared policies, procedures, best practices, resolutions, all those different types of things to make sure that not only our respective nation was taken care of, but that all nations across Indian country and Turtle Island were safe, and that, we could build off of what everybody is doing. But I can definitely say right now we have about 61% of our population vaccinated. But, I think the biggest hurdle that we're having to overcome is we are doing education, we are doing outreach, we're giving, several options on the vaccination. But, as there's a lot of historical trauma behind giving vaccinations that come from the federal government. And, the biggest thing is it is each individual's decision, but we have to continue to push those efforts and show the people that if we're willing to get it, we have to be willing to talk about, our own reactions and some of the things, the hurdles that we overcame, to show people that we're willing to do that and what those repercussions may look like. But that's probably really the only way that we're going to get back to what is considered the new normal.
Dr. Christensen, how do we help parents make a good decision to get their children vaccinated? I think it was the Washington Post article or something more recent too that talked about, children encouraging their parents to get vaccinated. And we know that, intergenerational decision making is a big deal. It's why a lot of young adults go back to college, right, is to be role models for their kids and vice versa. But what are you hearing in terms of the vaccines now being available for 12 and older?
Thank you for that question, and thanks Chairwoman Torres for her very poignant comments. Very, very excellent. We are actually hearing very positive things out in the field for the 12 through 15, despite the fact that the adults obviously weathered the worst impact of COVID with the severity of illness, with the loss of life. There were still many, many cases in the children, in the 12 through 15 and even younger. Thankfully, they were more resilient and they weathered it fairly well, but that still brings about the need to make them safe as well, because they're all in the household. And that was one of our earliest problems with getting so many people exposed, is multi-generations, which is normally a great thing, sharing the history, having your elders in the home, turned into something that was more harmful because they couldn't socially distance. Many didn't have running water, all the other things that we're challenged with in Indian country. And so therefore it was being passed back and forth, if you will, between all the generations. And we're now actually seeing a little bit of uptick in the younger generations being the ones coming positive, because we vaccinated so many adults. So we've protected the adults. We must protect our children, our future. And so we're working at, as you get to go back to sports, you get to see your friends again. It will keep you healthy, just like we got your parents and your grandparents and your elders healthy. And a lot of kids are stepping up. They want to get back to what they used to do, and they're willing to do it and get in line. As we said, we're really encouraging families to go together so everybody will be safe, and we know that that home is protected. So we're seeing really excellent response right now for most of the 12 to 15-year-olds. So I think this has been great that this happened, because that allows us to extend even more the community immunity. And we're hopeful it will continue through this summer and get the younger age groups as well, because we want everybody as safe as we can. It's just so very, very important.
Chairwoman Torres, you talked about education, and we heard earlier, right, Dr. Christensen talk about, hey, we're willing to share what worked for us, and then down in Gila River, in south of Phoenix, right? They're taking the vaccines to the people, similar to the strike teams that Navajo did. How do we get people's attention when there's probably a lot of fatigue too, right? With this, and maybe just a little of, I'll be okay. I've survived this long. I'll just stay on the fence. And like you said, we really value individual autonomy and individual decision making. So it's hard to tell people what they have to do. But what are your thoughts as a tribal leader to try to persuade the 40% who aren't vaccinated at Walker River?
Well, I definitely think continued education, on what exactly the vaccination is. And I think the hardest part that goes along with that is the trial and error time. There's no real data behind long-term effects, and that's what we're getting right now. And that's one thing that I'd really like to see how we can collaborate and work together to remedy that. Because that's the existing question is, what are the long-term effects? Am I going to start growing horns? Those different types of things. But we need to have that conversation, and we need to be real about it. And we need to be able to be transparent with our people. So, because you want to get their buy-in. I think outreach is definitely there. And I think each respective tribal nation is going to do it how they see fit based on their demographics, their geographics, and ultimately their membership, all those different types of things. I think having options of the different vaccinations available for everybody and, exactly what each one does, what they might expect, those different types of things. I know we're looking at a community health fair coming up, to try to continue to push those efforts forward to get everybody vaccinated. Again, like I said, we are a checkerboard reservation, so we have non-Indians that live on our reservation, and we want to make sure to include them as well, because it is a communicable disease that, we need to make sure to prevent spreading any further. We're also looking at doing some motivational speakers coming in to promote and protect, while looking at the altered mental status of our community. As Governor Bayo talked about, you've got depression, you've got altered mental status, you've got, domestic violence that's been going on, child abuse. You've got all these things that are escalating because everybody has had to be together during these times, and we're here really trying to promote personal care, wellness, getting outdoors. I think the one thing that makes me the happiest right now is, with our reservoir being closed, is our people have access to their ancestral homelands once again, and they are able to go out and fish and, utilize that reservoir to their leisure. And that makes me very, very happy, because a majority of the time it's swarmed with outside people, and they've really taken back control of that land. And then, we talk a lot about the healing. I think, we need to bring our people back together as a community, and what does that look like? And I think, again, the funding that's coming down to tribal nations is really going to help with that effort, because we are so far and few between. We need to bring in motivational speakers, people like Faith Spotted Eagle, that will help us with that healing process and continue those efforts of, we are community, we are whole, and what does that future look like for us? So I think those are definitely some of the things that we can continue to promote, as well as bringing in our other tribal leaders from Nevada, doing a collaborative effort, say commercials, because when Native people see their own doing it, they tend to want to step up to that plate and do their part as well. So I think that's definitely a win-win for all of us.
Awesome. You mentioned Governor Bayo. Let's bring him back as well. And I'm pleased to hear you're importing your motivational speakers from my neck of the woods. Faith is from Yankton, and a great leader. I just saw a post about some indigenous food that they were doing last week with a lot of folks. So it's a small world in Indian country, and it's always good to hear, as we heard from Maria Dadgar of the Intertribal Council of Arizona, tribes helping each other. because we want to help, right? We want to be supportive. Governor, what are your thoughts on what you've heard from Navajo and from Paiute land?
Well, congratulations to both tribal communities for doing such good work during this time. I appreciate the effort, and the Navajo Nation, they are our neighbors, and we've been just as concerned about what was happening during the peak of the pandemic, and as someone mentioned earlier, the interaction between tribal leadership during this time. I'm so grateful for that. The discussions, direct conversations that we would have, tribal leader to tribal leader, was key as well, because we were learning from each other. We were sharing experiences. Sometimes we were calling each other just to express some real feelings, and I'm really grateful for that. And the Navajo Nation situation, and the proactive efforts of the Navajo Nation really shed some light on some things and some process for us. So really grateful for that. And I appreciate the comments that have been made. And around vaccination, the efforts of the Navajo Nation and other tribes throughout the country, excuse me, Native people are so awesome. It's like there is just this natural creative thought and compassion and just love and great care that just fosters some really innovative work during this time of pandemic. And so we've looked to models of other tribes in the ways in which they've addressed COVID. And some have reached out to us, to ask about how we were able to manage and implement some of our programming, both on and off reservation. So it's been a great exchange, and what a wonderful way to help each other get through this tough time. That communication and willingness, and just generosity in terms of time and resources. I think this has been another thing that is just signature of Native people and Indigenous people, is the willingness to give, the willingness to share, and express our true thoughts and feelings when we are at a point where the challenge just seems so unbearable.
And sometimes that's just very subtle, right? It's not a big show. As Maria Dadgar of the Intertribal Council of Arizona was sharing, we don't want to embarrass people, right? And we want to ask for permission, before we offer help, because sometimes it's asking for help is one of the hardest things to do, right? No matter who you are, a tribe, a parent, a tribal leader, what have you. So congratulations to all of you for putting yourselves out there and being transparent with your own people, but sharing your stories, because I know we usually don't have enough time to do that, because after a long day, the last thing you want to do is maybe get on a Zoom or Facebook live chat and talk about stuff that you're tired of talking about. Let's bring in Nancy Davis, who's a parent in New Mexico, and who also happens to be the Native American Student Services Director in Santa Fe Public Schools. Nancy, thanks for joining us. What's this pandemic been like for your family and for some of the young people in your life?
Thank you, David. Thank you for having me this evening, and I'm honored to be in the presence of the governors and tribal chairwoman and the physicians out in Navajo country. This is a great group of panelists, and I feel very blessed to be here with you all. You guys are working on the front lines, making decisions, leading your people, and taking care of them, from the elders to the babies. And I just really value and honor that. And as a leader of our urban community here in Santa Fe Public Schools, working with school-age students, pre-K through 12th grade and their families. It's been, of course, a struggle, a challenging year, learning remotely, dealing with the loss and of life and the lockdowns and wearing masks and everything that everybody is facing nationwide. But with the remote learning, the isolation, kids not being able to connect with one another, with their teachers, participating in sports and other activities, I think has been a huge challenge for our Native students. Just kind of that loss of socialization, and it does definitely, it has worn on them. But on the upside of all of this is having the vaccine and working with our local IHS, getting the words out. The local pueblos have been very welcoming and offering their vaccinations to our community here in Santa Fe. So just really informing our parents, reaching out to them, working with the Santa Fe Indigenous Center to also help with not only the vaccination information, but emergency rental assistance, emergency food distribution, kind of meeting those basic needs at the beginning of the pandemic, getting out hand sanitizer, masks, the proper PPE. So it's been a team effort, as the leaders on this call have mentioned. It takes everyone coming together for the betterment and the safety of all. As a parent, my daughter just turned 15, and kind of just thinking about, I received my vaccination pretty early on, and of course it allowed, once you're fully vaccinated, you have a sense of freedom. I was able to connect with my mom again, my family, have in small groups when we were all vaccinated. It's just that extra safety net. But when Pfizer approved for 12 to 15-year-olds, I was a little skeptical, a little hesitant at first, just because we don't know the long-term effects. And I knew, I heard several parents and females saying, oh, I'm not going to get it yet. I don't know the long-term effects, just kind of that hesitancy. But then I reached out to some of my friends and family who are in the medical profession, and just hearing over and over and seeing how all of our Native communities were getting vaccinated. I said, you know what, I'm going to go for it, even though it was still early on for the 12 to 15-year-olds. And then my daughter's like, Mom, did you register me yet for the vaccine? And I said, no. She goes, well, all my friends are getting it. So it was kind of like this, almost like this peer pressure type of thing, where the group of kids were all getting vaccinated, and the kids were telling the parents to register them. So as soon as she kind of said, Mom, I'm ready, let's do it, I signed her up, and within like maybe 4 hours, I got the text message telling me that her appointment was set. And so, she was a little skeptical. She was nervous and scared because she always kind of passes out from vaccines. Her tetanus shot kind of sent her for a loop a few years ago. But the people that gave her the shot were so kind and informative, and made her feel at ease, and really made a big deal. They had this like this beautiful graphic, and gave them stickers and candy, and just really kind of praised them for making the choice to get vaccinated. So that was kind of our experience here. And now it's just, like I said, that sense of freedom to be able to hang out with friends again and family. She said, well, Mom, I was the only one in our family having to wear a mask. Everybody else outside could take their masks off because they're vaccinated, and I wasn't able to take off my mask, and it's getting hot. And so that was another kind of bonus for her wanting to get the vaccine.
There's more information on the vaccine technical issues at vaccines.gov. Dr. Christensen, what do we know about the vaccine and its safety with children and adolescents?
Well, we do know that all of the vaccines that we offer, and you know, the Pfizer's being given for the 12 to 15, they've all been tested very rigorously. And I think that over the time of the vaccination since December, we've shown that they're safe. They've been very effective. And I think that the science has been very, very solid on all of these vaccines. And the fact that we're rolling out age groups by age groups tells me that there's a lot of diligence in testing this and making sure they are safe for our kids and for our children. So I'm very supportive of these age groups as they come on board getting the vaccine. We're only seeing the very minor side effects of reactogenicity, which is typical with any vaccine. We are happily not seeing adverse events. We've been doing very well in Indian Health Service distribution sites with getting it out, and for people doing extremely well. So we have great confidence in the vaccines. And as I said before, we're hoping that the next age group will start wrapping up their research, and that we'll find that it's continuously safe for each age group as it moves forward. And we know that the Moderna is also testing multiple age groups, and we expect that they will apply for additional clearance by the end of the summer as well. So I think we have plenty of vaccine. I love hearing the story. Thank you, Ms. Davis. How much this means to our kids to get back to their lives and their friends, and being a young person, being an adolescent, it's a very important time in their life. And so if we can help them with that by vaccinating and giving that freedom back, I think it's a wonderful event. So thank you.
Nancy, is it looking like St. Paul, Santa Fe Public Schools will be in person in August when classes resume?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we went back to in-person the middle of April, I believe. And today, as a matter of fact, we just kicked off our Native American Summer Youth Program, which is in person. So we had not all of our, but a large number of our Native youth coming together at one of our school sites. Of course, we're practicing the masks every day and temperature checks. And parents need to be responsible enough, to know this COVID symptom signs and to keep their kids home if they display any of the symptoms of headache, nausea, temperature, those types of things. But our schools are well equipped as far as sanitizers, and our custodial staff is keeping our schools just really clean and disinfected, and windows open, and air purifiers, 3 or 4 in each room, and also trying to maintain the 6 feet social distance between kids, although that's a challenge. They just want to be playing with each other and being in close contact. But the kids are really taking this seriously. They're wearing their masks. They know it's serious and that it could affect them and their families and their grandmas and grandpas, and they're well prepared.
That's great. Well, before we wrap, I wanted to share one more of these radio spots that are speaking to keeping the circle strong. This is the We Can Do This Indian Country COVID awareness campaign, and there are Facebook, social media ads, there's print ads, and there's a series of radio ads that speak to this circle and what Governor Vallo started us with, the true collectivist nature, right, of our communities. It's not me, it's we. And let's listen to this this second radio spot before we come back and give our panelists a chance to say one last thing.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, who's this?
Who's this? It's your Auntie June.
Oh, what's up, Auntie?
Your drum group. Were you practicing last night?
Yeah.
It's a little quiet.
What?
How many people are in it?
6.
I thought so. It did not sound like it last night. Sounded like dog water.
What's that supposed to mean?
Jokes, Sonny, jokes. But let me just say, we could definitely tell there was the 6 of yous.
Well, only 3 of us got the COVID-19 vaccine, so we had to do what we could.
Well, as the leader of the group, you need to be that positive influence and help them all get vaccinated. Maybe give them a ride to the appointment or a call reminding them.
Yeah, you're right. I'll let the others know. The vaccines are safe and effective. Plus, anyone 12 and older is eligible to get vaccinated now.
Attaboy. Now start making those calls before I do.
No way. I'm on it.
We can do this. Go to vaccines.gov to find vaccines near you. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
I think we all have one of those auntie or two in our lives. Dr. Christensen, I want to give you a chance to share any final thoughts as the acting chief medical officer for the Indian Health Service. You talked about sharing what works, staying the course. What's coming down the road from IHS, and any other final thoughts that you might have?
Yes, thank you again for having me on tonight. So what's coming down the road is our continued push to get vaccines out into people's arms, providing extra support, whatever we can do to support that, or hooking tribal leaders together to help each other. As been mentioned, we are all in for this. We can definitely do this, as we are strong, we're resilient. We will continue to move forward until everyone is safe. So I do want to thank Governor Bayo and Chairwoman Torres for their great leadership during this very hard time. Ms. Davis for being here and speaking up for the kids. And everybody who has put their effort into supporting the vaccinations, thank you so much, because it is us together taking care of Indian country. So many, many thanks to you.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm glad several of our speakers talked about the mental health challenges of this, of being isolated, of being afraid. You know, Dr. Christensen talked about, folks in the Navajo Nation just afraid to leave their homes. But this has been really, really tough on kids. And I think this story will continue to be told as we learn more about the true impact, not only of lost learning over the last year and plus, but the impact on our children. And Nancy, what is your thoughts of someone like you had these Native youth at camp today, and your kids have been back in school for a couple months, which is great, but some places have been still doing virtual learning and not well. What advice do you have for us and our young people?
That's a great question. I think that focusing on relationships and the social emotional supports when kids do come back to school. Governor Bayo mentioned, the healing that it's going to take and the recovery, that teachers and school systems, school leaders have a plan in place on how they're going to do that and how they're going to address that. So building relationships before rigor, I think, is important. When you hear a lot about the learning loss, as you mentioned, kids have lost, so many points in math or so many points in reading, and that shouldn't be the focus. The focus is like, what did the kids learn? Focus on the assets, focus on the positivity. They did get to spend a lot of time with their parents and their community, and the intergenerational learning that took place during the lockdowns, kids going outside to play, reconnecting with nature and their animals, and their, taking care of their parents, helping out, things that a lot of kids in a regular normal school year would not have the time to do because they're running around to sports and athletics, or, focusing on the westernized schooling system, but really to have that time to acknowledge the learning that did take place while they were at home in the safety of their homes and with their families, and build upon that. And like I mentioned, having a plan in place on how to address the social emotional needs of the students when they do go back to the physical classrooms.
I'm glad you talked about relationships before rigor, right? Because I think we talk about the circle, and the circle can kind of sound, it's a nice thing, and it's if you've got time, yeah, we all want to work in the circle, but it's really, it's who we are, right? Relationships matter. Relationships help that learning. You can't learn if you have to heal first, right? If you've got a young person who's been triggered or who's coming with concerns mentally, they're not going to be able to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? Which I think you're mentioning. Chairwoman Torres, what are your thoughts as we close this conversation? And thank you so much for joining us. And one of the things that Nancy just mentioned is we've been able to be outside more often. And you talked about your tribal members being able to enjoy these open spaces and sacred places that they normally might have to compete with tourists over. I've heard multiple people in New Mexico talk about spending more time farming and being out in the field, with the corn and so forth last year. What are your thoughts tonight? And thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, and again, thank you so much for having me. I think definitely, I've heard a lot about culture, traditions, ceremony, those types of things. And I know most definitely that our people are resilient. They showed, we're 40 miles from the nearest grocery store. We're a food desert, so I saw a lot of our culture and our traditions coming back to our people, growing their own food, creating their own activities, to make sure that their altered mental status did not get the best of them, and again, I think that just shows the resilience of sharing and communicating and thinking outside the box on how we're going to continue to stay safe and stay well. I think, again, we have to really remember that we probably wouldn't be where we're at without community compliance. I think overall is a special thank you to our tribal membership and our communities for listening and preparing and protecting themselves. The last thing that I'd probably say is just a special thank you to, the staff, the emergency management crews that we had heard that are burnt at both edges because they're not only staff, but they're tribal members and they're, making things happen for the ultimate health and welfare of our people. Thank you to the current administration for making sure that Indian country's voices are included at the table. And also, Congress for the appropriate funding. And then also, continued thank yous to our partnerships, such as CDC, IHS, and ultimately respective tribal nations. So I would just say, we have to continue to prepare for the next 7 generations for the future of Indian country. And the vaccinations, I believe, are a huge part of this going forward. I do not believe that COVID is going to go away anytime soon. So we need to do our part and we need to get vaccinated. So thank you for the opportunity. Continued prayers for all the tribal nations and Boninawa, which means continue to be safe until we gather again. So we got you.
Thank you. Governor Vayo, I'll give you 90 seconds for your final words. 90 seconds-ish.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me for this program this evening. I really appreciate being with all the panelists and to hearing directly from more of our Native people tonight. About 3 months ago, I asked CDC, okay, so what's next? What do we have to prepare for? And one of the questions that I asked was, will there be a booster required? Is COVID really around for, beyond 2021? And their response was, we don't have an answer for you. Your questions are, we don't have the information. The science is lagging a little bit. And at this time, that was like 3 months ago. But there is more information. And it's forthcoming, and it will help us as we continue to prepare for the future. But we've also learned a tremendous amount about ourselves during this time. And I'm really grateful for that. because I think that it will cause us to live even more in balance moving forward. That our core values are our safeguards. Our culture and tradition save us. They will perpetuate life here in Acoma and in any Indigenous community. And I think the acknowledgement that Indigenous wisdom has a place at the table on a global scale is finally being acknowledged. And that these consultations that are happening now and that we've all been a part of as tribal leaders, thankfully, I'm so thankful for it, because this is so crucial to the future of our place in this country. And I have every confidence that the voice of Native America is being heard more than it ever has been. And so, with all of this in mind, you know, it's heavy. It's a weight on all of our shoulders, but we have to do this work now, because our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, those not yet born, don't need this burden. They need to, their stories, the stories that they will hear, is of a time that we got through a difficult challenge so that they could live in good health and prosperity and still speak our language, have our dances, have our ceremony. They will have this in the future.
Governor Vio, thank you so much. Hopefully, too, we will come out stronger, right, after these historical times of fighting off the being, the monster, and as Dr. Christensen put it. Thank you for your time tonight, Governor. Chairwoman Torres, thank you so much for joining us from the beautiful desert homelands of Walker River. Nancy, thank you for spending time with us, because it sounds like you had a long day with your youth program, and you probably are ready to put your feet up and hopefully not do too much prep for tomorrow. But thanks so much. And Dr. Christensen, we really appreciate all of your front lines experience and your guidance with some of the health issues. And thank you for spending time with us from your home in Phoenix, Arizona. There's more information on your screen at wecandothis.hhs.gov or vaccines.gov. Please keep this conversation going with your friends and family, and play that Nagy ante and get that drum group to move from the dog water sound to the full drum group sound, and we'll hear those drums ringing in our ears soon. Thank you. Good night from We Can Do This Indian Country. Take care. Get vaccinated. Give each other a hug. Good night.